Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Public Works Committee. The date is Thursday, August 22nd, and the time is 8 a.m. And let's go ahead and get started. Now we've called to order. Our first matter of business is roll call. Councilmember Jefferson is present, as well as myself. Councilmember Althauser, Councilmember Swarthout is excused this morning, so I'll be helping us walk through the agenda in her absence. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes from the July 18th, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve.
And I'll second. It's a motion by Councilmember Jefferson, seconded by myself. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes. Moving into our substantive agenda, our first order of business is a right of entry agreement for a property on Belmore Street. And David, I think you're going to help us walk through that.
Yeah. Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
Quickly share my screen here and we can get going.
Looks good.
All right. So yeah, I'm here today to ask for a signature from the mayor for a right of entry agreement for the property that owned by Jason Herrera on Belmore Street. And this is going to help support beaver habitat as well as improve our ability to maintain our stormwater infrastructure out on Belmore Street. So Belmore Street has a culvert that allows Fish Pond Creek to pass through. The culvert was identified in the 2011 annexation area drainage study, and it was recommended for replacement due to its being undersized. The replacement calls for an 8-foot wide box culvert. The roadway after the culvert only serves one business, and so the project is a fairly low priority for us. And there's other higher priority projects that have taken precedent. This culvert hasn't been maintained in quite a while, and it needs to be cleaned and maintained to reduce upstream flooding of the culvert. This is a photo of the culvert. We have here the area to the north there, that is ADS or Hancor. And then we've got a few residential houses to the south of that. This is the property in question here, Jason Herrera's property. And you can see Fish Pond Creek bisects his property. There are a series of beaver dams on the property that have impacted water to flow downstream. And so our plan is to work with Jason Herrera to install a flexible leveler on his property in the beaver dam nearest the culvert, and that would help maintain water levels at a consistent level, so maintenance on the culvert can take place. We have been in consultation with several of our partners with this project. We just got the DFW HPA permit this week, so that's good to go. We have been in consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as Beavers Northwest on this property, and everybody is on the same page. We actually have another meeting coming up here right after this meeting, actually, to discuss the finer details of this project. We have a fairly good success rate with these types of projects, the public-private partnership projects, where we have beaver mitigation devices on private property. We've got several projects that we can point to for success. The Linwood Avenue property owned by Linton Wildrick, Pioneer Street property, the Palermo Wetland, 66th Avenue, which is a very near to this property. All have been really successful in achieving our goals of maintaining water levels and allowing private property owners to to have a stake in these types of projects. So in conclusion, the right of entry agreement with Jason Herrera is pretty important for this project to take place. And I'm asking for a signature from the mayor and Public Works Committee to recommend the approval of the signature. Any questions?
No questions here.
Yeah, I don't have any questions either. This is not the first one we've done.
Right.
Yeah.
With
So
that, make motion. Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. That was all I was. So go ahead.
I move that we approve and recommend the mayor sign the right-of-way entry agreement with Jason Herrera for the Belmore Street property.
And does your motion have a recommendation that it be on the consent calendar as well?
Affirmative, yes.
Very good. And I'll second that. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes unanimously. That was a quick one.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And the next item on our agenda is the agreement for transfer of interest in brewery assets. And Dan, I think you're gonna help us with that one.
I am. Good morning,
Awesome.
council members.
Good morning.
Share my screen real quickly for you. Mouse is having some technical difficulties, as is my computer, so we're just gonna cross our fingers, hope for the best, and start the slideshow. Hopefully you're seeing what I'm seeing. So I'm here to talk to you this morning about the brewery water rights transfer of assets. It's probably been about a year since we've last touched base with City Council on this issue. This is really not a new issue, though. This started way back in 2006, following some condemnation proceedings with the old former brewery water rights, and following the brewery ownership of it, it was All American beverage or bottled water. And at that time, the cities stepped in and to ensure that the water rights would not be relinquished due to non-use. The cities condemned the water rights and some properties to support the development of those water rights, and entered into an interlocal agreement with the cities of Olympia and Lacey to jointly put those waters to best community use. So once that issue, that fairly large issue, was settled, it took a number of years. The cities came together and formed kind of an initial partnership planning meetings to determine how best we could all work together to utilize those water rights and serve our communities with that water. In 2011, we hired RH2 Engineering, who is still with us today, to help us really kind of do some initial planning work, look at some analysis with the water quality, conveyance systems, what does the aquifer support in that vicinity. And so we really come up with a three-phase project. First phase being the aquifer and infrastructure assessment. You see it in the lower right-hand corner there, the cover of that. That was actually a photo that made it far and wide. I believe it was in the Olympian, as well as, talking about the work that the three cities were doing together to really evaluate early on what we all acquired through those condemnation proceedings, looking at the infrastructure, looking at the, again, looking at the aquifer, evaluating its capacity to actually produce those water rights. Once we kind of got our heads around what all exists out there, we started to try and determine how are we best using it. Are we going to utilize any of the existing infrastructure? Are we going to develop new facilities? What does the partnership look like? How is it? What's the ownership model look like? How does the water need to be taken out of the ground? What timeline do the partners need the water? And so, as you can imagine, the development of that strategic plan really looked at pretty much every angle we could think of from a partnership perspective about how best to utilize the water, and was that development best incremental or all at once? And as you may remember, it was determined that not all three cities needed the water at the same time. It's always been the city of Tumwater was interested in producing that water first, looking at developing its increment of water, with those water rights being split in a third. City of Tumwater going first with its third, City of Lacey moving second with its with its third increment, and then City of Olympia coming on somewhere in the farther future at that time. And so, we started really kind of developing a memorandum of understanding that memorialized all of that. And as you can imagine, this, have beginning these conversations in 2010, we've been at it for now 14 years. Lots of conditions change over the time. During that conversation, as we were initiating phase 3 with the MOU, and following the completion of the strategic plan at the time, some changes happened for our partners. For most importantly, the City of Olympia and the City of Lacey, some additional water rights were acquired through some of their other processes, and I guess the impetus, the motivation for the City of Lacey shifted a little bit, where they had some additional internal capacity to produce water and meet the needs of their community in a different way. And so they started really kind of contemplating how best can they serve their city. Was it with a very expensive pipeline? Was it with a very expensive project here in Tumwater, working with the City of Olympia to basically distribute that water into their community, or was it some other method? And recognizing that we were already 10 years into the project, just to determine how best we're going to use it and look at the partnership, we recognized that we were under a really tight timeline to put that water to beneficial use for the Department of Ecology. And so we jointly, we completed a joint defense agreement where we worked together to submit to the Department of Ecology an extension request for the construction and completion of those water rights. In 2021, they granted that extension. Allowing us up to 2041, I believe it's April of 2041, to put the water to beneficial use, meaning to construct the facilities we need to produce the water and get that water into our pipelines to serve our communities. And so we have a rather generous extension from the State Department of Ecology. Following that granted extension, we developed a memorandum of agreement. This is probably one around the last times. You probably remember us coming and having significant conversations around the brewery wellfield assets. And, we started contemplating, well, what if one of the partners wanted to or needed to, for some reason, withdraw from the partnership? What would that look like? How would the assets transfer to another partner? And we developed the memorandum of agreement about how and describing what that process would look like for the transfer of assets agreement. The following year, the City of Lacey submitted to the partnership notice to withdraw from the partnership and transfer its assets to one of the other partners. Through that process, the City of Tumwater agreed, and the City of Olympia did not object. And so over the last year, we've been working with the City of Lacey to determine what the value of the water rights are. In the picture here on the right-hand side, you see the 3 properties that are owned by the partnership that are integral to the development and production and treatment of those water rights. So we followed a very similar process as we looked at what the transfer of assets would look like. We followed the process outlined in the MOA. First part being a valuation of the property and the water rights. We tried to follow again the process that was outlined, that was done when the original acquisition of these water rights happened back in early 2000s. And so we had Westwater come and provide a evaluation of the water rights themselves of 761 acre feet, 2,171 gallons per minute. That would represent the amount of Lacey's 1/3 of their assets. It's about enough to serve approximately 3,200 homes in and about there. We also had RF Duncan come in and value the property itself. And so those two values together, along with other considerations with the infrastructure, also considering the liabilities. There are about 30 wells, I'll say, that are existing on site, along with existing infrastructure throughout not only these 3 highlighted properties here, but also farther into the golf course. On the left side of this property, that's really the side of the driving range in the north end of the golf course that you see here. And so there's extensive infrastructure throughout those properties, and those wells represent a significant liability for the partnership. And so we wanted to make sure that that was considered in the transfer agreement in terms of the evaluation and negotiation of what the overall cost would be. In addition, we considered infrastructure removal and storage tank removal. And let me see if I can pull up my highlighter to show you the storage tank. Here we go. This little kind of circular object you see here on the graphic, that is a 1 million gallon storage tank. We had that evaluated for either use or decommission. And the recommendation at the time was decommission because it doesn't meet our potable water standards in terms of storage of potable water. However, there might be some other options that we might want to consider its use for in terms of treatment and helping balance and provide some equilibrium in the treatment processes. So that was an important consideration for us as well. And then another liability, which is not necessarily a liability, but it is something that we wanted to consider as the partnership requires planning and efforts and cost to move forward in terms of how all this works together. And so those were kind of the four major we'll call deductions or liabilities as far as the cost negotiation was considered, along with evaluations, the pluses, so to speak, in that equation. Back in October of last year, we came to the city council for an executive session where we discussed this project and we determined kind of the boundaries of the negotiation. And I'm here to offer a recommended acquisition, proposed acquisition cost of $2,400,461, encompassing all of the assets and all of the liabilities to acquire the city of Lacey's portion. So this is all going to be predicated upon, of course, we assume that the valuation has been accepted. These were the conditions outlined in the memorandum of agreement with the cities relating to how assets would transfer to one property or one partner or another. Once this agreement is accepted, there is a request for a right to use in perpetuity certificate, and that recognizes that one city cannot rely upon water that is not provided to them in perpetuity. We can't lease water rights, so to speak, and provide for development based on that lease. They have to be owned.
So Dan, I have a
Yes.
question.
Mhm.
Since Lacey chose to disengage, so what is the significance of their withdrawal? Do we not share water with them and just with Olympia?
Correct. So that is what this partnership means. So if they're withdrawing from the partnership, they are relinquishing their 1/3 of the share of the water. And the memorandum of agreement that we agreed to in 2022 stipulated how that would happen and what were the conditions of that transfer. And so in this case, if the presumption is that Lacey City Council will move forward with the agreement as well, and that means that they will be transferring all of their assets to us, the water rights and the infrastructure and all of the liabilities we were just talking about to the city of Tumwater. We would assume those assets and liabilities. So the city of Tumwater would gain the ability to use that water. But we would also take on their share of the costs in terms of the well decommissioning, and then the decommissioning of the other asset or the other infrastructure. We would take on 2/3 of the overall cost for planning, 2/3 of the cost for overall construction of the facilities, and then as well as other costs that would come forth. So the partnership, instead of being an equal 1/3 split between the partners, would be a split of 2/3 the city of Tumwater and 1/3 the city of Olympia as we move forward.
All right, thanks, Dan. So this is our investment in our water. Thanks.
Correct. And as I mentioned, it's about enough water to serve about 3,200 homes. It's about 3,200 ERUs we refer to it as equivalent residential units. And so that was a great.
Can I ask a question too, Dan? So far as the partnership goes, how does this affect the decision-making process? If we have 2/3 of this stake, I don't recall our ILA or our MOU with Olympia, but do we have to agree unanimously on this is what the tank is going to look like and do, and this is the one we're going with? Or if we have 2/3 of it, does that mean that we have 2/3 of the decision-making power as well, or does it have to be unanimous with Olympia when we make those partnership decisions?
You bring up a great question. That is an awesome segue into slide number 4, I think it is, or slide number 5 of the next steps. So yeah, we'll get there in a moment. But the short story really is, you know, we haven't completed that memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding or interlocal agreement. I think it's going to take the interlocal agreement form with the city of Olympia. So now that we are transitioning out of the partnership with the city of Lacey, that opens the door for the city of Tumwater and the city of Olympia to sit down again, dust off the old interlocal agreement that we had come almost to agreement on as we started to identify some of these challenges for the city of Lacey and the concerns for the city of Lacey that led to ultimately this transfer of assets. Is to kind of dust that off and kind of renew some of those conversations about the overall ownership and management of the brewery wellfield as it would stand. So thanks, Councilmember Jefferson, for your question, because that's really how the ownership, that kind of led to the ownership question around the right in perpetuity certificate. So until the city is able to put, and the partnership, so to speak, is able to put the water to full beneficial use, which we are hoping is somewhere in the range of 2026, 2028. We're hoping that the well field is constructed by 2026. It might take us some time to get to that full quantity. Is for the full beneficial use. But once that full beneficial use happens, the city of Lacey would issue us a quitclaim deed for that water right, the use of those water rights in perpetuity. So that brings us again to the next steps. Is really, phase 3 is completing that work, which is the MOU /ILA and the wellfield design with RH2 Engineering. We've already, or I think it was earlier this year or late last year, submitted kind of it was, I think, an amendment to the contract that we had filed with RH2 a number of years back. But the contract was amended in 2023 to kind of consider a different development package in terms of the number of wells, and how do we move the initial design and permitting process through the Department of Health so we can begin construction ultimately with this. And so we are hoping that the specs in the bid package are complete by October 2024, and we can go out and hire a driller and begin some of that initial groundwork to reproduce the brewery wellfield water. That also, as we were just talking about, Councilmember Althauser, necessitates the need for the city of Olympia and the city of Tumwater sit down, reevaluate the MOU that we had previously had with them, renew the partnership conditions, and execute that formal agreement. And I believe we are scheduled for next month to start that conversation with them. So there have been some just acknowledgments behind the scene that that this actually is one of our kind of biggest next steps. City of Olympia has been a fantastic partner so far in this process, and I would say under most conditions we are very much in alignment in terms of the previous MOU and the conditions that were outlined in there in terms of how the partnership could work and should work. And the City of Olympia is also in a good situation where the water that we would be developing and producing at this site is not needed for them in the immediate horizon. So that gives them a little bit of flexibility in how they operate here at the site as well. So like I said, they've been a great partner, and I would anticipate that we could come to a formal agreement rather quickly. I don't foresee another 10 years in front of us as we negotiate that next step with the City of Olympia. So concurrently with the well development, the well field design, once we have a couple of new wells in the ground, you'll see down here, if I still have my laser pointer, you see down here in the lower left or right hand corner, well 39. We've done some evaluation of well 39. That was one of the only wells that we would keep on site. And so we have determined that there is some productive use. However, we would feel a much more secure having some new wells, and so we're looking at a process with RH2 to design and construct up to 3 wells, depending on the volume of water we can withdraw or they're productive. We're hoping for 1 well that gets very productive, but likely 2 wells. So we have some redundancy and backup in the aquifer here. Ideally, we'll be able to stay on the east side of the river, Deschutes River, as we have an easement that runs along the railroad track up to these properties up in here. And then all of these other wells would be decommissioned at that time. So this would be kind of concurrent with the conversations with the city of Olympia. Ideally, coming up with some conceptual designs that we can submit to the Department of Health with some preliminary water quality information and the designed water quality treatment. We anticipate that the Brewery Wellfield is going to add some additional treatment considerations for us that we haven't had to engage in the past, likely manganese treatment. So we anticipate that that's going to be a new kind of operating endeavor for the city, and but we welcome that challenge, and that would be what the package the Department of Health looks like, and we would hope that we would be able to submit that department to Department of Health by next year, which would ultimately lead us to the final design and construction late 25, 26 for the Brewery Wellfield. The production facilities, the wells would be sited on the valley floor here, and then the treatment and delivery system, so to speak, would be to Cleveland Avenue, Yelm Highway, up in on the right hand east side of the city there. So, you know, that like I said, final design has not been completed yet, but we will be bringing those forward as well as those phases fall into place, so to speak. That's really the nature of where we're at today. Executing this agreement is a major step for us to move forward with this. It modifies the partnership. It brings Olympia back to the table to renew what the partnership looks like and outlay those conditions. And concurrently, given the timeline that we are under for construction and for use of this water, it gets us kind of moving back in that vein as well. So, any additional questions?
Angela, you have any questions? If you're chatting, you're on mute. Can't hear you.
No additional questions here. I'd like to make the motion if Dan is complete.
So our requested action is to recommend City Council authorize the mayor to sign the brewery asset transfer agreement with the city of Lacey to permanently acquire Lacey's Brewery Wellfield assets, including all the water rights, infrastructure, and the associated liabilities of the Brewery Wellfield.
Thanks, Dan. With that, I move that we place the brewery asset transfer agreement with the city of Lacey on the September 3rd, 2024 City Council consent calendar with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
Can I ask a quick question? I didn't have a question before, but now I have a really quick question that just came to mind before we vote. So Dan, with the approved valuation, is this the last time it'll appear before the council in terms of authorizing us to acquire the rights? I guess, like, my question is this a vote to sign an agreement to agree to the transfer, or is it also a vote to pay $2.4 million for that purpose? Because if it's the latter, I sort of feel like it should probably be on consideration instead of consent, because that's a significant
huge amount. Yeah, I agree.
So the agreement accomplishes both. It modifies the partnership, it acquires the assets for the city, and within 90 days of execution of the agreement, we would submit payment to the city of Lacey for the
Okay.
for those.
Dan, would you be okay if we put it on consideration instead of consent?
I fully expected that it would be.
Yes.
You know, and however, if that is going to be the case, and I am sorry, I don't have a calendar here in front of me. I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay.
Yeah.
Sure. There we go. I will be out of town on September 3rd, so I would ask that it would be put on the September 17th consideration calendar.
If we need to move forward more quickly than that, Dan, I can help out with the presentation, but I'm happy to defer if it's okay to defer that to that second meeting in September as well.
I think the timeline does allow for us. I know the city of Lacey is also hearing this at around the same time, and we both anticipate by the end of September it would be heard by both parties or by both councils, and so that works just as well.
September 17th doesn't put a wrench in the works.
No, not that I'm
I
aware of.
tried to use a water analogy. It couldn't really figure it out.
I will confirm with the city of Lacey, but I would anticipate that would be fine. And so we can leave it at that. And if something needs to change, I can work with council member or city administrator Parks to update that date if needed.
Okay. That sounds good. So Angela, is it okay? Do you accept a friendly amendment to your motion to place it on the September 17th
Consideration.
station?
That would be the change, yes.
Well, I will second the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That's great. This is really exciting. Water is the future. I think we've said several times.
Absolutely. And this
So,
is one of the
really
bigger
important.
steps for us,
Yeah.
in the city in terms of water source redevelopment or development in particular, as we've talked about for a couple of years now. So major steps. So I appreciate it and thank you. And we'll see you again on the 17th.
Sounds good. The next item on our agenda is a fiber optic agreement with WSDOT. I always forget how people use the acronym. I always say WSDOT. I think that's wrong. Bill, I think you're going to help us walk through this one.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, council members, attendees. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, where are we? There we go. So let's see. Whoops. So can everybody see that? Is that okay? All
Yeah,
right.
that's great.
Okay. I don't know why it has. Can you see the stop sharing thing in it in the middle? Oh, wait.
No,
Okay,
we-
there's a phantom showing up on my screen. I don't know what it is exactly. Anyway, so good morning. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about today is the fiber optic agreement with WSDOT, and that's amendment number 16. So I want to go through this real quick. The city of Tumwater currently has a interlocal agreement with WSDOT for fiber optic services. That agreement was originally done in July the 11th of 2005. And the agreement in essence provides for the preservation of this interlocal agreement is critical to the success of the city's day-to-day operations. The city has quite a few shared services with this fiber optic system. This is police, fire, EMS, IT, and also the golf course. If you remember, we requested a while back for the replacement of the fiber optic system up at the Trosper Road roundabouts. And that replacement, which was definitely needed to put that in where it needed to be, is part of this same system that runs all the way down from up north down to tie into here at the City Hall. Amendment number 16 is a new amendment, and that is in reference to the Israel Road water main project. So it's a part of that project in the sense that, if you remember, that project was both a water line rebuild on Israel Road, but it was also an undergrounding of the overhead utility lines. And part of those utility lines that are being brought underground is the fiber optic system. So our past project installed the conduits and everything to do that work. This amendment is to actually move the actual fiber and make all the connections that are required for that fiber optic system to operate underground. The system that's being relocated is 2,800 linear feet of fiber optic line, and it stretches from Lenderson Way to Capitol Boulevard. It'll also include installation of underground fiber vaults for the connections, the fiber splicing and the labeling, which is a bit of work to do that. And then also the removal of the overhead fiber system so that we can eventually pull those cut down poles that we have on Israel Road and finish that entire overhead conversion. The work that was completed was completed by WashDOT. So under their contract, they have a subcontractor, which is INSI, that they subcontract with. That's an approved fiber optic contractor. And they contract the work, they complete the work for us, and then they bill us through the actual fiber optics contract for the work that's completed to do that. The amendment number 16 is a cost of $34,621.91, and it's funded through the fiber fund here at the city. So that was a pretty quick one. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I have a quick question. Is the fiber fund just a name for any other account that is it funded by our general fund and our operating budget, or are the funds in there derived from like revenues that we extract from cable agreements or other things like that? How do we actually fund the fiber fund?
I'm not exactly sure how that's actually funded completely. I actually tried to look into that. I don't know if Brandon can touch on that, but I know it.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So the fiber network was mostly set up actually by private entities, private telecommunications coming in. When they put in their own facilities, we require them to install ductwork. So, and then also when DOT went through and worked on their network, we were able to hop on and get a couple strands on their network. So we don't have we haven't spent very much money getting the system up and running, but the conduit that was put in for the city, we actually rent that out to private entities who, rather than coming in and running their own conduit and having all those costs, they rent it out to us for a certain amount per foot. And then we update it annually, and that's how the fund is funded. So it is its own separate fund within the city.
Okay. Great, thank you. Angela, do you have any questions about this one? Pretty simple.
No questions, and I'm ready for the motion.
Okay, let's go for it.
Okay, I move that we place the fiber optic agreement with Whiskey Sierra Amendment number 16 on the September 3rd, 2024 City Council consent calendar with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
And I will second that motion.
And
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that I think I forgot to put on there that we were recommending it to go to consent.
Yeah, but I think Angela said that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I said that, Bill.
Yeah, so it's not on here, but we said it, so that we're good, I think.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. All right. So I pull up my agenda again. My screen sort of froze. I think we have one more item on here, if I recall. Bear with me while my agenda reloads. All right, that brings us to the 2023 pavement maintenance project with Miles Construction and regarding additional construction funds.
All right, so I have this one too. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, there it is. Share. Okay. So I'm going to be talking today about the 2023 pavement maintenance project. So that was a project that we completed or worked on last year for the pavement maintenance throughout the city. And we'll be talking about the request for additional construction funds for that particular project. Just a quick overview of what that project was. The majority of all the work was completed for that project last year. It included different roadways throughout the entire city. We completed asphalt roadways, sidewalk repairs, utility casting replacements, storm drainage repairs, pavement crack sealing, and also pavement marking work. Pretty typical for our normal paver projects that we do every couple of years. So there was nothing outstanding on that particular item. So we're asking for additional construction funds. So I was going to start with kind of going over the construction fund component and what we're asking for as far as costs. And then I want to talk about the two items that we're asking additional money. So the contract award was with Miles Construction for $3,857,000 or $857. The construction funds that were utilized during the course of the paver project were $4,171,958.32. That's the total amount that we've spent so far. As you know, normally with our paver projects, we tend to ask for 20% change order authority at the time we do the paver project. On this particular one, we only ended up asking for a 10% authority. And paver projects have a dynamic aspect to them. So typically, just depending on the roads that we work on and how it all lays out, our bid amount might be a little bit different than our actual total cost by the time we're finished with the project. The change order authority that we were originally granted was 4.2 million. The request that we're asking for is 20%, which is 4.6. The extra items that we're going to be talking about today are two specific items that we'd like to complete as part of this project. One of them will be a Crosby pavement repair. There's a pavement repair that's required on Crosby, like I said, which I'll touch on here in a minute. That's about 95,000 estimated. And there's also a additional portion of roadway that we'd like to complete under this contract, which is a grind and overlay of Israel Road. And that's actually from the bridge to Linderson Way. And that's about 145,000. So total about 240,000. The estimate for those additional costs runs around the 15% mark. So about 5 or 6% more than what has been spent to date on the particular project. So I wanted to touch on the Crosby Boulevard repair first. So that's the one that we're estimated is about $95,000. When we did the paver project last year, there was an overlay that was completed from the Barnes Road, Crosby intersection all the way down to Fortner. So if you can see there on the right, the area in question is from Somerset Hill to Fortner Drive, and it's the northbound travel lanes. We completed the overlay, and then a number of weeks after the overlay was completed, we started to notice the pavement was rutting. So we were seeing some pretty significant ruts in the asphalt and some other signs of settlement in the northbound lanes. We did some investigation out there at the site. We cut into the pavement, took a look at what's going on. We realized that we had water infiltration underneath the roadway. And then upon further investigation, we found two issues with the storm drainage system out there on the site. The first one was one of them was a clogged storm pipe downstream from a root ball. So some street trees had intercepted storm lines downstream, and probably due to the fact that was more of in the fall. There was, trees and stuff tend to grow roots pretty aggressively in the fall. And that's usually when you're going to get your plugs, your full plugs. And it pretty much plugged the pipes completely over that month or two. We also found a utility crossbore. Now the utility crossbore was kind of upstream, but it was at least 20 years old. So it's been there for a long time. And that's when a utility company bores a underground line and they hit another utility. So they crossbored. I'll show you a picture in a minute, but they crossbored and broke part of a storm pipe. So we had those two things going for us. And my suspicion after the investigation that we did is that we had some pretty substantial rain events in the fall. And I think the root ball backed up the entire storm system and caused water to infiltrate underneath the roadway and started to bleed between the asphalt and the subgrade of the road. And that's ultimately, I think, what created the saturated the subbase and started creating the damage with the rutting on the roadway.
This is, I think, I drove on this yesterday, and this is it's kind of wavy, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
driving on it, and you kind of, it's brand new looking road, but you go up and down right around that curve, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I was going to show a picture of it, but it's almost impossible to see from a picture. You actually have to get in there and drive it to see kind of what's going on, and that is pretty normal for kind of subgrade failure. You'll see that kind of thing metastasize in the actual road surface. You'll see the rutting and the kind of wavy components. What we have done in the meantime is the city crews went out and they repaired the root ball and the damage to the storm pipes. So the storm pipe is back up and running. And the utility company went out and repaired the crossbore location, which I said was very old. It had been there for a long time. So again, my suspicion is that the operation of the paving disturbed the underground soils and caused the water to find a different path. And unfortunately, that path was between the roadway and the bottom of the asphalt. The repair that we're going to need to do is we need to remove the existing pavement out there, repair the road subgrade, and then repave that portion of the roadway. If we don't repair it, it will continually get worse. We did repair, just as a side note, we did repair last year 2 of the worst locations. But it would be a good idea to repair that before the end of the year, before winter starts. So the cost of that repair is about $95,000 to complete that. And Miles would be doing that under the 2023 paver project like we've been talking about at the same unit prices that they had back then. Then here's a quick picture. To the left is kind of a root ball and kind of what it looks like when it gets inside of a pipe and it basically just clogs it up. The picture in the center is the storm pipe crossbore that was broken. And like you can see, those pipes are pretty old. They've been there a very long time. So that crossbore has been there for probably 20 years plus. And that just gotten worse over time. And to the right is a picture of a part of the pavement that we removed. And you can see kind of how the subgrade there's rivulets inside of there and then a lot of surface water. So the surface water is what's creating the rutting in the roadway. So the second item that's part of this is our request to ask for additional funds to complete the Israel Road repair. So the Israel Road repair component is the part of the roadway on Israel Road from the I-5 bridge to Linderson. This was not, so this part of the road is not being repaired as part of the current Israel Road project that we're working on right now. So this is out beyond those limits. And this portion of the road if we don't repair it now, grind and overlay it, we're going to end up doing it on the 2025 paver. We just think that it makes more sense to complete it now for a number of reasons that I'll talk about. That portion of the road has some pretty severe alligator cracking and rutting throughout the roadway. We did cut into it when we did the water project, but it has a number of old utility cuts all over the place on that road too. So the road's starting to degrade at a higher rate. And we're hoping we can fix it before winter because then we can avoid maintenance costs with potholes and other things that happen during the winter months. The fix for that road would be a full width asphalt grind and overlay, and then new pavement marking with some other minor things that we would complete as part of the grind and overlay process. Estimated cost on that would be $145,000. Miles Construction is going to be using our 2023 bid prices for that project. I think probably the biggest reasons for completing this as part of the 23 paver project is, obviously the roads, like I said, the road's in poor condition and really needs to be repaired. Miles is already mobilized because Miles is actually working on the Israel project right now. So they already have equipment and things out there. And by the time we're done, if we do add it to this, the 23 paver, by the time it's all said and done, we'll have the roadway completed from the I-5 bridge all the way to Capitol Boulevard. So that whole segment will be completely repaired. And then I think the cost, the funding for this project is primarily the Transportation Benefit District, and then any transportation CFP funds that we might need, but primarily it's Transportation Benefit District. So I'm sure you might have a few questions. Does anybody have any questions on what I've presented today?
So is it fair to characterize this as it's not like we're authorizing 20% because there's cost overruns or something. We're authorizing 20% so that we can add more projects onto the list. Is that a fair characterization?
I think that's I think definitely with Israel Road component, that is, we're kind of adding that to the project because it makes sense and it's required, but it wasn't originally on the 2023 paver. The repair is just a function of an issue that arose that we really need to address.
Okay.
I asked the same thing, Michael. This is addition to, and it makes sense to me, and it's not because of underestimation on our part. So yeah, it's just, looking out, which is a good thing. So if we can save the city, money, it's just good looking out and good oversight. So thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Great. Angela, would you like to make a motion if there aren't any other questions?
Affirmative. So I recommend the City Council approve and authorize an increase in the change order authority provided to the Transportation and Engineering Director under Tumwater Municipal Code 2.14.060 from 10% to 20% for the 2023 paving maintenance project to be placed on the September 3rd, 2024 City Council consent calendar.
And I will second the motion. So motion by Councilmember Jefferson, seconded by myself. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. Great. That brings us to the end of our substantive agenda 7 minutes early. Awesome. Thanks everyone for the great work this morning. We got a lot done. This is great. We'll see you in 2 weeks. All right. Bye.